She told him to move like he didn't belong. Then the pilot walked out and saluted him in front of everyone. The airport was loud, but Samuel didn't rush. He never did. He stood still for a moment inside the terminal of Memphis International, letting the sound of rolling suitcases and overhead announcements pass over him like waves. In his left hand was a small duffel, faded brown with the zipper slightly frayed. In his right, his boarding pass, seat 3A, first class. Samuel didn't usually fly first class. He didn't see the need. But this ticket had been a gift from his congregation at Mount Olive Baptist. He was heading to Atlanta to see his great-grandson Ezra perform in a school talent show. His very first time on stage. "You're gonna be so proud, Granddad Sam," Ezra had said on the phone, voice buzzing with excitement. "I'm doing a poem about heroes, and I'm wearing Daddy's old uniform shirt. The one from when he was little like me. Welcome to the Black Side Stories." Before we continue, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, subscribe to our channel and help us share their stories. So Samuel had agreed. He'd pressed his one good Navy button down the night before, ironed the crease into his khakis just right, and made sure his shoes were clean. Not new, just clean. The leather was worn soft from decades of Sunday services and long walks through his neighborhood, checking on neighbors who needed groceries or a kind word at the gate. He waited his turn, scanning the area with eyes that had seen over 8 decades of change. When they called for first-class passengers, Samuel stepped forward, nodding politely to a businessman already standing in line. He didn't make eye contact long. He didn't like to draw attention. Once inside the plane, the air felt different, cooler, quieter, the seats wider. Samuel made his way down the short aisle of first class and saw 3A waiting for him by the window, a seat he'd never sat in before. He placed his duffel in the overhead bin carefully and lowered himself into the seat with the kind of care that comes from years of living with an old back injury from his construction days. He looked out the window. He always liked doing that, watching the baggage handlers move with purpose, the ground crew coordinating like a well-rehearsed dance, the way the tarmac shimmered under the Tennessee sun. He could sit like that for hours, just watching people work, each doing their part. There was peace in that rhythm. Samuel reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. Inside was an old color photo, edges soft from handling. Him at 22, standing beside a Huey helicopter in Vietnam, arm around his buddy Marcus, both of them grinning like they owned the world. He rubbed his thumb over the corner of the photo and smiled to himself. That boy never thought he'd live to see 84, or first class, or great-grandchildren performing poetry about heroes. He tucked the photo back inside and leaned into his seat, just beginning to let himself relax. The flight attendant had mentioned they'd be boarding for another few minutes, and Samuel was content to sit in the quiet anticipation, thinking about Ezra's excited voice and how the boy had insisted on practicing his poem over the phone 3 times. But something sharp broke through the calm, like a needle through cloth. "Excuse me." A sharp voice cut through the aisle, jolting Samuel from his quiet moment. He turned his head. A woman stood in front of him, late 30s, maybe early 40s, tall with sleek blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon. She wore a tailored charcoal blazer, designer jeans, and heels that didn't seem built for airports. Her carry-on bag was leather, expensive, the kind with tiny metal studs that caught the cabin lights. Her expression was irritated, like someone had already ruined her day. "That's my seat," she said flatly, pointing to the 3A placard above Samuel's head. Samuel looked up calm. "Ma'am," he said softly, "this is seat 3A. "No, it's mine," she snapped. "I always fly first class. There's no way I got anything but a window seat. I specifically requested it." Samuel gave a small nod and reached into his pocket again, producing the same boarding pass he'd tucked away earlier. "It says 3A right here. See?" he said, holding it out for her to examine. But she didn't glance at the pass. Instead, she looked at him. All of him. His navy shirt, slightly faded from years of washing. His weathered dark skin, the deep lines that ran across his face like stories nobody bothered to ask about. Then she looked at his hands, calloused, dry, worn smooth from decades of honest work, as if those hands didn't belong on leather armrests. "No offense," she said with a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes, But are you sure you're in the right section? Maybe they made a mistake with your ticket. Samuel kept his voice even. I believe I'm where I'm supposed to be, ma'am. At that point, a few passengers nearby began to shift in their seats. Some watched from behind magazines. Others glanced up from their phones. Nobody spoke, but eyes were moving. The tension was subtle but unmistakable. That particular kind of discomfort that settles over a space when something isn't right, but no one wants to be the first to say it. I'll just get someone, the woman said, rolling her eyes. This is ridiculous. She turned and waved down the nearest flight attendant, a young woman in her mid-20s, clearly new to the job. She approached with the nervous smile of someone who's still trying to figure out how to keep everyone happy while the plane fills up around her. Hi there, the flight attendant said, her voice bright but uncertain. Is there a problem? Yes, there is, the woman said, gesturing towards Samuel, like he was part of the furniture. He's in my seat. Can you check his ticket? The flight attendant looked at Samuel, who quietly handed over his boarding pass without saying a word. She scanned it, then looked up, then scanned it again. Her brow furrowed slightly. Oh, she said, voice barely above a whisper. It does. Say 3A. The woman crossed her arms. Well, that's not possible. My assistant always books me 3A. Always. I fly this route twice a month. The attendant glanced toward the front of the plane, unsure. I can double check if you like. Maybe there was a system error. Samuel looked out the window again. He didn't say anything. His lips were pressed together, but his expression hadn't changed. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the best response was no response at all. Let the situation reveal itself. The flight attendant hesitated. She looked at Samuel, then at the woman, then back at Samuel. Then she did something Samuel didn't expect. She leaned down and said, Sir, would you mind just stepping back to coach for a minute? Just until I can sort this out. Now it was silent. Real silent. Even the businessman in 3C, who'd been pretending to read Forbes magazine, lowered it completely. A mother with a toddler 2 rows back stopped bouncing her child and turned to listen. The entire first-class cabin seemed to hold its breath. Samuel turned to face the flight attendant fully. There was no anger in his voice, no trace of frustration. He simply said, Why? The attendant blinked. Just for a moment, sir. It'll help me figure this out. He held out the boarding pass again. But I showed you. It says 3A. I know, but then what is there to figure out? Her smile cracked slightly. She didn't know how to answer that question. Because the answer was uncomfortable and she knew it, the woman beside them let out a loud sigh. This is unbelievable. I have a presentation in Atlanta at 9 a.m. I need to prepare. Samuel looked straight at the flight attendant, not with fire, but with something deeper. Something like disappointment. Like a man who'd seen this kind of thing more times than she could count, in more places than she could imagine. He took a breath. If I go back there, he said slowly, people will think I did something wrong, or that I wasn't supposed to be here in the first place. But I didn't do anything. I bought my ticket same as everyone else. The weight of his words settled over the cabin like a blanket. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. The flight attendant opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. And then, just as the silence was becoming unbearable, there was movement at the front of the plane. A shadow first. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, purposeful. The footsteps grew louder, steady, each one like it had a destination and wouldn't be deterred from reaching it. The flight attendant turned her head toward the cockpit, suddenly unsure of her next move. From the front of the plane, a tall man stepped out. Dark skin, salt and pepper hair cropped close, and the kind of calm in his walk that made people instinctively sit up straighter. His uniform was crisp, his bearing unmistakable. His nameplate read, Mitchell, Captain David Mitchell. Captain Mitchell scanned the cabin briefly. His eyes landed on Samuel, then the flight attendant, then the woman still clutching her designer bag like it was armor. He didn't raise his voice. Is there a problem here? He asked, already knowing the answer. The flight attendant stood upright, words tumbling out too fast. There was just a seat mix-up. I was about to, but the captain held up a hand. Just once. Enough to say, let me handle it. He turned to Samuel. Sir, may I see your boarding pass? Samuel handed it over without a word. The captain took it, looked it over once, twice, then nodded slowly. Seat 3A. That's you. Then he turned to the woman. "Ma'am, would you mind showing me yours?" Her face twisted slightly, but she dug into her handbag and handed him her boarding pass. Captain Mitchell took a long look. "Ma'am, you're in 7B. Aisle. Seat, coach." She blinked. "That's not possible." "I'm afraid it is," he said, then added, "We can call the gate if you'd like, but I've seen these boarding passes a few thousand times." The woman's jaw tightened. She looked around the cabin like it was going to rise up and agree with her, but no one said anything. Not the businessman in 3C. Not the couple behind her. Even the flight attendant stayed silent now. And Samuel? He just stared out the window again, his posture unchanged. The captain looked back at him. "Mister?" he asked gently. "Washington," Samuel replied. "Samuel Washington." Captain Mitchell gave a short nod. Then, without hesitation, he stood at attention and saluted that it wasn't for show. It was clean, controlled, respectful. The kind of salute that meant something. "You served," the captain said. It wasn't a question. Samuel paused, unsure if he should answer. Then, "Army. Long time ago." "I know," the captain said. "That pin on your duffel's worn through, but I recognize the shape. 1st Cavalry Division, right?" Samuel finally turned from the window. He nodded once, slowly. Captain Mitchell lowered his salute. "My grandfather used to tell stories about your unit. Said you were the ones who made sure the rest of us got home." There was a different kind of quiet in the cabin now. Not tension. Respect. The captain took a breath and looked at the flight attendant. "Get Mr. Washington anything he wants. He doesn't wait, and he doesn't move. Not for anyone." Then he looked at the woman. "You'll need to take your assigned seat, ma'am. And I suggest we all move on now." For a second, she didn't move. But something had shifted. The room wasn't on her side anymore. Even she could feel that. She gave a stiff nod and walked off without a word, heels clicking hard against the floor. The flight attendant cleared her throat. "Mr. Washington, can I get you a drink? Water, coffee, something else?" Samuel didn't answer right away. He reached down, opened the side pocket of his duffel, and pulled out a small piece of paper. It was a program from Ezra's school, with his great-grandson's name highlighted in yellow marker. He looked at the photo of Ezra in his father's old uniform shirt, grinning with gap-toothed pride. Then he looked up. "Water's fine," he said. The flight attendant nodded and disappeared into the galley. But not everyone had moved on. A passenger in coach had just started recording, and the internet was about to meet Samuel Washington. The phone camera was angled just right, just enough to capture the tail end of the salute, the woman walking back toward coach, and Samuel sitting in 3A like nothing had happened. The man recording, mid-30s with a beard and Braves cap, whispered to the woman next to him, "You get that? That was real." She nodded, phone in hand too. That man didn't even flinch. A few rows back, someone quietly typed on a laptop, headphones around her neck, fingers dancing across the keys. The headline on her screen, "Elderly veteran asked to move by flight crew. Pilot responds with salute." But Samuel didn't know, didn't care. His phone was a flip phone. He only used it to call. Family, internet, social media. He'd never needed any of that. He was staring down at Ezra's program again, thinking about how proud the boy would be to see his great-grandfather watching from the audience, thinking about the poem Ezra had practiced about heroes and how sometimes heroes were just regular people who did the right thing when nobody was watching. While the flight prepared for takeoff, the murmurs continued, low, not loud enough to cause trouble, but enough to carry through the rows. "That was wrong, what she did. He handled it better than I ever could." People always think they can judge someone by what they wear. Some didn't say anything out loud, just glanced at Samuel and then looked away quickly. Ashamed, maybe, that they hadn't spoken up when they could have. Maybe they'd been on the edge of saying something and hadn't found the words. Maybe they were thinking about their own grandfathers, their own fathers, their own moments when they should have stood up but didn't. Back in economy, the woman, whose name was Victoria, sat stiffly in 7B. Her arms crossed, lips pressed into a line. She kept her eyes on the back of the seat in front of her, avoiding every glance that came her way. It was as if she hoped that if she didn't move, didn't breathe, the moment would disappear, but it wouldn't. A young girl sitting across the aisle from her leaned toward her mother and asked, just loud enough to hear, "Why was that lady so mean to the grandpa?" The mother shushed her gently, but Victoria heard it, and it hit like a stone in still water. Still, Samuel didn't notice. Or maybe he chose not to. He was too busy remembering something else. A day in 1969. Da Nang. His squad had been pinned down for hours, ammunition running low. Samuel had volunteered to make the run back to base for supplies. As he was leaving, a kid, couldn't have been more than 19, fresh from Iowa, grabbed his arm. "You coming back for us, Sergeant Washington?" Samuel had looked him in the eye. "Son, I wouldn't leave you if the whole North Vietnamese army was between here and home." He'd made that run 3 times that day, brought back ammunition, medical supplies, and reinforcements. Every man in that squad made it home. Samuel never forgot their faces, never asked for thanks, never needed it. But somehow, that kid's question always stuck with him. The trust in those young eyes. Back in the present, the flight attendant returned with a bottle of water. "Here you go, Mr. Washington," she said softly. He nodded, took it, and said, "Thank you, miss." She hesitated, then said, "I'm sorry about earlier." Samuel looked at her. "You were just trying to keep the peace." But sometimes peace don't come from asking the wrong person to compromise. She didn't know what to say to that, so she nodded and walked away, but peace wasn't what was coming next. A passenger had just uploaded the video, and within minutes, it was already taking off faster than the plane itself. 10 minutes after takeoff, Captain Mitchell was reviewing weather conditions when a knock came at the cockpit door. It was his co-pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Thompson. Late 20s, former Air Force. Still carried that mix of precision and curiosity that younger officers have when they're around someone they respect. "Hey, Cap," Thompson said, pulling his headset down around his neck. "I think you need to see this." Captain Mitchell raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong with the weather radar?" "No, not weather." Thompson held up his phone. "Passenger posted a video. It's going viral already. Like, real viral." Captain Mitchell leaned back, expression unreadable. "From earlier?" "Yeah. Got over 8,000 views in under 15 minutes. Comments are blowing up." He handed over his phone. The video was shaky, but the message was clear. The image of Samuel sitting quietly while Victoria stood over him. The flight attendant's hesitation. And the captain's own salute. Mitchell watched himself on screen, his hand lifting to his brow. It felt strange seeing it from the outside. He hadn't done it for views. He'd done it because it was right. That he handed the phone back. "Social media is fast." Thompson nodded. "You handled it like a pro. I mean, the whole plane's talking about it now. The cabin crew's getting questions already." The captain took a deep breath and looked through the windshield into the clouds. "Let them talk. It's good for people to be reminded what respect actually looks like." Thompson leaned on the back of the seat. "The crew's wondering if they should check on Mr. Washington again, just to make sure he's okay." The captain didn't answer right away. Then, "You know, my grandfather used to talk about men like him. Said they didn't ask for recognition. Just wanted to be left alone to live there. Lives with dignity. I saw a man sitting in a seat he earned 50 years ago." Thompson nodded, his voice quieter. He didn't even flinch when it all went down. Just sat there like it was nothing. "It was nothing to him," Mitchell said, "because he's probably seen worse. He's had to be stronger, quieter, more patient than any of us could guess." A silence filled the cockpit. Not uncomfortable, just weighty. Finally, Thompson broke it. "What should I tell the crew?" The captain checked his instruments, then adjusted the throttle slightly. "Tell them to let him be. And if anybody gives him trouble, first class, coach, or otherwise, they'll be speaking to me." Thompson smiled. "Will do." He stepped out of the cockpit and closed the door behind him. Back in the cabin, Samuel had finally closed his eyes. Not to sleep, just resting. He knew how to find stillness anywhere. It came from years of learning to carry disappointment without letting it change your face. What he didn't know was that thousands of people were now watching that same face online. Watching him say nothing and realizing just how powerful that could be. But not everyone watching was a stranger. One of those views came from someone who knew Samuel very well and hadn't seen him in almost 15 years, back on the ground, in a small apartment just outside Birmingham, Alabama. A man sat hunched at his kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at a paused video. It was the same clip from Flight 847. The confrontation, the silence, the salute. He rewound it, played it again, watched Samuel tilt his head slightly. When Captain Mitchell raised his hand, he paused on that moment, Samuel's eyes full of memory and quiet strength. The man at the table was named Jerome Washington. Mid-40s, construction workers' hands, faded tattoos on his forearms. A box of unopened mail sat beside him. The TV in the background played the news on low volume. Ignored, he hadn't seen that face in years. Not since the argument. Not since he'd told his father he was tired of living up to impossible standards, that he was done trying to be the man Samuel wanted him to be. Now here he was, watching him on a stranger's phone screen. Still got that same look. Jerome's voice cracked when he spoke, even though no one was there to hear it. Like you know more than you ever say. He swallowed hard. A photo hung on the refrigerator, faded and bent. It was him and Samuel arm in arm, both younger, standing beside Jerome's first apartment. The day he'd moved out, trying to prove he could make it on his own. Samuel had helped him move, never said a word about their fight, just showed up with his truck and spent the day carrying boxes. Jerome pressed play again. Up in the sky, 30,000 feet above Georgia, Captain Mitchell walked the aisle one more time. He didn't usually leave the cockpit twice during a flight, but something felt unfinished as he reached Samuel's row. The old man was awake again, looking out the window like he was reading something written in the clouds. "Mr. Washington," the captain said gently. Samuel turned, eyebrows raised slightly. "I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for today, but for everything before today." Samuel offered a slight smile. "A lot of people did more than me. Maybe. But today you reminded everyone what grace looks like." The captain reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pin, circular, bronze-colored, with a pair of wings carved into it. It was a personal token, one he only gave out to pilots who showed real character. He placed it on Samuel's tray table. "This was given to me by my first mentor. Said it was for those who rise without making noise." Samuel stared at the pin for a second, then looked up. "You sure you want to give that away?" The captain nodded. "I have never been more sure." Samuel picked up the pin, turned it between his fingers. "I had a friend. Vietnam. Didn't make it home. Always said, when someone sees you, really sees you, you stand a little taller." He looked at the captain. "Today I feel taller." The captain smiled, eyes glassy. "Safe travels, Mr. Washington." Samuel nodded once. "And to you, Captain." As the captain turned to leave, a few nearby passengers clapped quietly. Not a spectacle, just acknowledgement. Respect. Back in coach, Victoria sat still in 7B, earbuds in, face unreadable. She hadn't looked up once. Maybe she couldn't. But not everyone on that plane would forget what they saw, and not everyone would stay silent about it. When the wheels touched down in Atlanta, the usual shuffle began. Seat belts unclicking, overhead bins opening, carry-ons dragged into the aisle like anchors. But something was different. Passengers weren't in a hurry to push past. No sighs, no grumbles. People were watching. Samuel remained seated in 3A, his duffel still above him, his hands resting lightly on his knees. The pin from Captain Mitchell was tucked into his shirt pocket, snug against his heart. As the rows emptied, a woman in her 30s stepped out from coach. She paused beside him, holding a toddler on her hip. "Mr. Washington?" she asked quietly. Samuel turned to her. "I just wanted to say thank you. My father served too. I think he would have liked you." Samuel smiled softly. "He probably would have liked you more. You're the one doing the heavy lifting now." She chuckled, adjusted her child, and gave a small nod before continuing down the aisle. Then came a teenage boy, backpack slung over one shoulder. He didn't say anything, just held out his hand. Samuel shook it, firm and simple. The boy whispered, "Respect," before walking off. Even the businessman from 3C leaned over. "Sir," he said, clearing his throat, "that was something. You showed real class." Samuel replied, "Not sure I showed anything. Just sat still." "Sometimes," the man said, "that's exactly what people need to see." Finally, the flight attendant came back. Her face looked different. Not rehearsed. Sincere. "We'll have a wheelchair at the gate if you need help getting through the terminal." Samuel waved her off. "I can walk." She hesitated. "Well, I'm sorry again for earlier." Samuel nodded once. "You learned something. That's worth more than sorry." He stood, grabbed his duffel slowly, his back clicking a bit, and stepped into the aisle. Passengers parted for him. A narrow tunnel of acknowledgement. No words, just space. But halfway to the door, someone else appeared. Victoria. She was standing beside her seat in 7B, bag on her shoulder, eyes slightly red. She didn't look at him until he was right next to her. Mr. Washington, she began. He stopped. I made assumptions, she said. Her voice wasn't polished anymore. It cracked on the edges. I thought I knew everything the second I saw you. Samuel tilted his head slightly, not judging, just listening. I was wrong. I saw someone and didn't bother to see anything about them. He let that hang for a second, then replied, You didn't hurt me. She blinked. But you hurt yourself. That's who you embarrassed. Don't apologize for me. Apologize because you want to be better next time. Victoria stood frozen. No words left. Just a slow, honest nod. Samuel turned again and stepped toward the front of the plane. By the time he exited, the gate area was half full. People from other flights stood nearby, some whispering, others staring. A woman approached with a phone already filming, but he raised a hand. No thank you. I've got places to be. He didn't say it sharply, just firmly, like a man who knew the difference between attention and respect. But as he walked through the airport, another familiar face was watching him from a distance. Someone who'd been waiting for years and who had something to say. Samuel had just passed the security checkpoint exit when he spotted him, leaning against a wall near baggage claim. Arms crossed, baseball cap low over his eyes. Jerome. Samuel slowed, unsure at first. He hadn't seen his son in close to 15 years. Not in person. Not since the day Jerome had said, You don't know me, and I don't want to be like you, and walked out of his life. But now he was here. Older, heavier, softer in the face. Samuel stopped just a few steps away. Jerome looked up. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jerome said, You looked smaller on that screen. Samuel let out a breath through his nose. You looked younger in my memory. They both stood there for another beat. Jerome broke it. I saw the video. Someone from my crew sent it in a group chat. I almost dropped my damn phone. Samuel chuckled. Yeah. Watched the whole thing 3 times. Didn't know whether to be mad at that lady or proud of you. Then I figured maybe both. Samuel shrugged. Didn't do much. That's the part that messed me up, Jerome said. You didn't do anything. And that's what made it matter. He scratched his beard, glanced at the floor, then back up. I came because I figured maybe this was the right time. Samuel didn't say yes. Didn't say no. Instead, he asked, You got kids? Jerome nodded. 2. Girl and a boy. You ever tell them about me? No, Jerome admitted. But maybe it's time I start. Samuel shifted his bag from one shoulder to the other. I ain't mad at you, he said. Jerome blinked. Why not? I was angry. Said things. You thought leaving would prove something. I let you go because I figured you needed to find your own way. Now you're back. That says enough. They stood there like 2 men who had wasted a lot of time, but weren't about to waste another minute. You hungry? Samuel asked. Jerome cracked a smile. You asking or challenging me? Samuel smirked. There's a diner across from the rental car lot. I could use a plate of something that ain't peanuts and pretzels. They started walking. And just like that, without fanfare, without apology, the bridge between them wasn't rebuilt. It was just crossed. That evening, Samuel sat in a folding chair in the front row of Morningside Elementary School's auditorium. The walls were decorated with construction paper stars and crayon-drawn backdrops. Ezra peeked out from behind the curtain, spotted him, and gave a double thumbs up. Samuel waved back, his eyes wet. Next to him sat Jerome, holding a phone to record. His own hands were shaking a little, but he didn't hide it. When the lights dimmed, Samuel leaned over and whispered, Kid's going to kill it. Jerome smiled. He gets that confidence from your side. They laughed, quiet and easy, and when Ezra stepped onto the stage and proudly delivered his poem about heroes, about ordinary people who do extraordinary things just by staying true to themselves, the audience clapped politely. But in that front row, Samuel clapped just a little longer, just a little louder. After the show, Ezra ran up to them, still wearing his father's old uniform shirt. Granddad Sam, did you see me? Did you see my poem? Samuel knelt down, his old knees protesting. I saw you, son. You were perfect. I told everyone about you in my poem. About how heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just sit still and do what's right. Samuel looked up at Jerome, who was smiling through tears. Sometimes, Samuel said, hugging his great-grandson close. That's exactly what the world needs. There are moments in life when you get asked to move, and sometimes the right thing to do is stay seated. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn over a lifetime and defend with silence, grace, and truth. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to remember what dignity really looks like. And if you've been holding back forgiveness, maybe today is a good day to let go, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just sit still. This has been the Black Side Stories. Until next time, remember, behind every great achievement is someone who stood watch, someone who believed, someone who preserved what matters when no one else was looking.